So how do we step into a new year? Not any new year. How do we step into 2020? How do we step into a new year with mindfulness? I was looking for a way to set a kavanah, an intention for the year, for myself, maybe for us as a community. And I was wrestling this week with different teachings from our tradition, different places in the Torah. And I ended up with a page 22. Not 42, that's the answer to the question of the meaning of life. But on page 22 of your prayer book, at the bottom, might be, perhaps, the affirmation to set us for this new year. A quote from one of the greatest rabbis who walked this earth, Rabbi Hillel, who lived in the 1st century BCE, and whose words, whose teachings were captured in Pirkei Avot, usually mistranslated as the ethics of the fathers, including, I think, in the prayer book. First chapter, verse 14. It's mistranslated and is the common translation as ethics of the fathers, but it really, in Hebrew, it means, Pirkei Avot means the first principles. First principles. And here's one of the first principles. And bear in mind that Rabbi Hillel wrote and taught at the time of great upheaval in the Jewish community, in the Jewish world. It was the time of the violent time of the Roman Empire that decimated our people in the time of their occupation of our land. And he wrote this, or he taught this verse, Im einini li mili, וכשאני לעצמי מה אני, ואם לא עכשיו, מתי. And we have it translated here as, if I'm not for myself, who will be for me? And if I'm only for myself, then who am I? And if not now, then when? Now, if you look at just the first verse, if I'm not for myself, who will be for me? You might think to yourself, well, that's a very selfish way to enter the new year. You know, from the perspective of us, Americans of the 21st century who grew up in a very individualistic culture where, number one, it's all about number one. We may read this sentence in this way, but I don't think that's how Rabbi Hillel thought of it. He lived in a very different time, in a very different consciousness, where actually the sense of individualism did not appear yet in the world. If you're taking my class, on the spectrum of consciousness, I will explain actually why the consciousness of this individualistic consciousness did not exist 2,000 years ago. And so he could not have really mentioned that you have to be for yourself. What would that mean for him? It would not mean anything, because there was no such a thing of existing alone. We existed in community. That's how we understood ourselves. So I suspect that what Rabbi Hillel was talking about was not a selfish affirmation, like you have to look out for number one, but instead, to me, it sounds more like the image of the oxygen mask that drops. We all heard that on the planes. The first thing you have to do is to put it on yourself. That's, I think, the way he understood it, because if we don't take care of ourselves, if we don't take care of this container, of this body-mind, if we don't nurture ourselves, then we're good for nobody else. Right? We become depleted. We lack energy. We ourselves are unable to function, and therefore we can be of no service to anybody else. So I think at least, and I'm going to go a little deeper than that, but at least Rabbi Hillel probably had in mind, put the oxygen mask on yourself first. Nurture your being. And in fact, lead by example, because if you do this, others will be inspired and understand that it is critical to heal and work towards healing ourselves in order to be supportive of those around us. But then as I was studying that sentence and sought to find the deeper meaning to it, I found the teachings of another profoundly Jewish Buddhist teacher, Sylvia Boorstein, who we had as a guest here at Bet Aleph a few years ago. And I was thinking about her title of one of her books. I love the titles of her books. She's always so creative. One of the ones that I like is Funny You Don't Look Buddhist, which I love. But the one that I had in mind this time was the book she titled Happiness is an Inside Job. Happiness is an inside job. And I think what Hillel is inviting us here to discover for ourselves is exactly that. That happiness is an inside job. That we owe it to ourselves to not just nurture our soul in our body, but to really understand that as we are able to stand our ground, to deeply root ourselves, we actually can find a way to open our heart to ourselves and to others. To no longer wait for the world outside to validate who we are, to tell us if we are successful or if we are failures, to no longer depend on the look of others to see ourselves beautiful and holy, to in fact turn our gaze inward and to know the truth of our holiness and our gorgeousness and our enoughness. Happiness is an inside job. And Rabbi Hillel is inviting us to reclaim this inner locus of power, our inner locus of power. To no longer give it up to the forces outside of us, to authorities outside of us, our bosses, our clients, our whatever our life is bringing us into, but to reclaim the inner locus of power and to know that rootedness, how strong we can stand in our own being. Im einini li mili, I have to reclaim that power for myself. Again, not selfishly, but that I can be a force for good, for myself and for others. Happiness is an inside job. Love it. Powerful teaching. Powerful book. And I think if that is true for us as individuals, then perhaps we can take even that first sentence of Rabbi Hillel and bring it in our hearts as the first of our affirmations for this new year. That as part of my affirmation, Imeinini li, mi li, if I'm not for myself, who will be for me? That I reclaim, right here, right now, the inner locus of power. And when I am able to do that, then I'm no longer standing in my life as a victim of my circumstances. Then I can be in life and I can be in the world and no longer need the world and my life and others to be any different than they are. I can accept and embrace the world as it is presenting itself to me with all its ugliness and darkness, but also all of its beauty and gorgeousness. And I can stand and embrace both, to be with what is exactly as it is, and to stop fighting reality, to stop arguing with the story of the world because it doesn't comply with the story that I would like to tell, and to simply be with, this is the story of the world, amen. And I don't worry about it because I stand in my own center, in my own ground, deeply rooted in who I know to be an expression of spirit, an expression of love and compassion, and I can face anything that comes to me with that kind of energies, untouched, unmoved. And if that is true, I would like to invite you into affirming that for yourself this year. And you know why? Because this year it's going to be chaotic. This year is going to do everything it can to pull the rug from under us. The earth is going to shake. We are going to be invited in the roller coaster of hatred, divisiveness, anger. And if we collapse into that, we will lose ourselves. And we will only contribute to those energies back into the world. We will, in fact, amplify that which we seek to diminish. So be a force for embrace from that strength of your grounded self. And if we do this for ourselves in 2020, I think we as a Jewish community need to do that for each other as well. We are under attack. Let's not dance around it. We've been under attack. There's been a numerous violent attack. We have had some of our people already die here in America from anti-Semitic violence. It's happening almost every other day, maybe not in Seattle, but in other places in the world, in the US, mostly on the East Coast. Every day, little attacks, violence on the metro, in the buses, at the train station. Jews are being verbally attacked, physically attacked. It's here. Venim ein ani li mi li comes to tell us that if we are not for ourselves now, then who will be for us? It is a time for us as a community to stand our ground as well, to know our strength, and to not lead a fearful life. To affirm the authenticity of our tradition, the beauty of our tradition, the pride that we have in this gorgeous tradition of ours that has been around for 3,000 years. And to fight anti-Semitism everywhere we find it, to raise our voices everywhere we hear anti-Semitic comments being made. And it can happen to all of us, any one of us, tomorrow, anywhere. But we cannot cower behind fear. Im ein ani li mi li. If I am not standing for my people, for myself, for my tradition, what am I waiting for somebody else to do it? I should not be waiting for anyone else to do it. So we, each and every one of us, need to stand shoulder to shoulder with all Jewish people everywhere, whether they are from different denominations, whether they worship like us or not, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. At this point, we have to let go of the inner fighting because we are being reminded of the fragility of our lives here and now. But Hillel continues, Hillel continues, and he said, but if I'm only for myself, what am I? And so perhaps as we seek to stand as a community, as a Jewish community, on our own 2 feet and to take our destiny into our own hands and to fight anti-Semitism everywhere, we also cannot absolve ourselves from also stepping in when we hear racism around us. Maybe not addressed to the Jewish people, but to other people. We need to keep fighting for injustice wherever injustice happens. We need to keep fighting for the preservation of our democracy when its institutions are being dismantled. We need to keep standing up to save all the lives of all beings that are sharing this planet with us. Those are not fights, or I don't like the word fights because that's not what we're doing, but those are causes that we cannot ignore just because we have to look inside. Rabbi Hillel was telling us and warning us against becoming an insular community, That is not how it's going to work. We have to be also participating in the healing of all. In the healing of all. So perhaps that is also part of our affirmation, of our kavanah, of our intention to set a resolution to set for this year. To find our inner locus of power for ourselves, but also to, as a community, for ourselves and others. Because that's what the mask is for. You put it on yourself first, but that is only because you want to be able to help the person next to you who might not have been able to. And then I went a little bit deeper than that. I just love how things like that keep unfolding. The more you stay with it, the more you wrestle with the words, the more you see that it's not a mistake that on the 14th verse of the first chapter of the essential principles of our tradition as it was laid out 2,000 years ago, this teaching was brought up because this teaching is deeply non-dual. This teaching is inviting us to awaken to a consciousness that transcends dualism. Shani le'atzmi ma'ani, what am I? What am I? Rabbi Hillel is asking us to transcend the little story of I, the little narrative of our ego-bound consciousness, that make-believe character we have created that we call me. It is inviting us to transcend that, and the way he's inviting us to do that is by asking a simple question: what am I? What am I? Because if I continue to be so self-absorbed, if my attention is only focused on the story of I and its drama, then I am missing the fullness of the being that I am. If I'm only observing and witnessing and collapsed into the ongoing wrestling with life, the ongoing dissatisfaction with everything, the ongoing fear, then I am missing most of what I have. I like to use the image of an iceberg. I love the image of an iceberg. I mentioned that in a class some years ago, but I'm going to mention it here tonight. Rabbi Hillel is inviting us to go a little bit underneath the surface. See, if I'm only for myself, all that I'm living, all the band to which I exist is the tip of the iceberg. And from the tip of the iceberg, and I see all the other separate icebergs from me, all of us seem to be separate from each other. And you are drifting in your own iceberg way, and I am drifting in my own iceberg way. Sometimes we collide. Sometimes we collide in violent ways. And I just don't like the way you look as an iceberg. Like, why are you taller than me? Why are you better than me? Why are you a better iceberg than me? Why are your shape so much better than my shape? Right? We have this separate sense of selves that creates animosity between us. Rabbi Hillel is telling us, ma'ani, right? If I am only living in that narrow space of consciousness, what am I? Why am I forgetting all that is actually underneath the waters? That is not subject to the seas tossing us this way or that way. That is always calm, always beneath the currents. And that is vast, that is grounded, that is solid, But then if we continue to ask, ma ani, what am I? As an iceberg, I'm going to start to realize that what I am is water. I am no different than the ocean that props me up, that manifested itself as that solid being, as a solid version of water. And that solid version of water was manifest and is going to one day melt back into the ocean. It's not even melting back into the ocean, it's already into the ocean. It's not different than the ocean. It is the ocean, in fact. It is the ocean. You are the ocean. Why are you still believing you're an iceberg? Why are you still not just believing you're an iceberg, you're believing you're just the tip of it? I was going to make a really bad joke. There's children in there. If I'm collapsed in believing I'm just the tip of the iceberg, then I lose consciousness. Ma'ani, what am I? I am the ocean expressing as this form right now. I am the ocean. You are the ocean. We are all the ocean. There's nothing, absolutely nothing, that separates us. We are ocean manifest. And if we are able to live just a few moments of the day from that consciousness, to see each other, to see one another as just bubbles of the ocean, are just expressions of that ocean of consciousness, then we will be able to step into the world of illusion, into the world of story, into the world of made-up ego crap stuff from a place of wisdom, from a place of compassion, from a place of unbounded, unconditional love. And we will be so much more effective in affecting a change. Because if we try to affect change from the place of our egotistic story, all we're going to keep creating is the perpetuation of that, of humanity's suicidal ego story that is unfolding in front of our eyes right now. In fact, I would venture to affirm that unless we are able to wake up to that kind of consciousness and that kind of understanding, we will go down the path and follow through with that suicidal story of humanity. And Rabbi Hillel tells us, Ve'im lo achshav, matai, and if not right now, then when? Because the invitation is for us to engage in those kind of practices that will allow us to wake up. May we, all of us, wake up this year in 2020. May we, all of us, broaden our horizon and our consciousness that we might see more, that we might know more, that we might act from that place within of wisdom, of compassion, and of unconditional love. Ken Yehi Ratzon. Amen.